right, are we ready to do this? We're back. Hopefully, you all had a good week. Hopefully, you're well rested. Not too well rested, though. Jeez, Monday morning. It's a hard way to start, right? Yeah, so my family and I, we went to New York. We did the whole Times Square thing. Not sure if anybody's been to New York before, but it's a pretty good city. I liked it. We were there for like 5 days. We left on Sunday. Get my phone out of my pocket. And we came back on Thursday. So we were there for a good long while. The only problem I had is the bathroom situation in New York City. Like there aren't a lot of bathrooms. And you see me, I like to drink a lot of water, stay hydrated. You probably see me running to the bathroom in between almost every class. What goes in has to come out. So that was a bit of a problem. Like you just can't walk into any store like, hey, do you have a restroom? No. Not sure. If you've ever gone to New York and walked the streets of New York, you know this. Like, sorry, go around the corner. But then if you go around the corner, it might be a Starbucks or a Wendy's, and you need a receipt because there's a code. It's a whole thing. So that was the only part I didn't like. And around here you'll see people with like huge soda cups, big coffee cups. In New York, I didn't see a lot of that just because people walking around can't use the bathroom. So other than that, I had a good time. It was just like, oh my gosh. I don't know. Anyways, that wasn't too fun. Today, we're going to talk about more things that aren't fun, or at least this week. We're going to talk about the country of Australia, and we're going to go way back because this country, it's also a continent, right? The continent of Australia has a history very similar to the United States. And we've gone over parts of the history of the United States and the government's treatment of Native Americans. Australia doesn't have Native Americans because it's not America, but they have the equivalent, and they are called Aboriginal people. Okay, so Aboriginal people. And a lot of times, we've talked about colonialism. It's a tough subject to wrap your head around, but basically, well, I'll pause here. Colonialism, can anybody like sum that up in about 10 seconds? If anybody did, hopefully they said something like where mostly European powers went all around the world trying to gather up land, gather up resources, and kind of like cutting the world up. And that's what happened in Europe, France, parts of Canada, England, parts of the United States. England got Australia. And so when the people from Europe came, there were people living there already, and they were called Aboriginal people, and they had a very tough go. A lot of racism. After this video, we're going to watch a shorter video where there is an interviewer. She's not very good, by the way. Like, I thought she was so bad that I went into the comments, and a lot of the comments said the same thing. It's like, wow, it's not good. And so, but the woman, I don't know how old she is, maybe young lady, whatever, telling the story about her family. I'm not going to spoil anything, but as recently as the 1970s, some really horrible things were going on with the Australian government and how it relates to Aboriginal people. All right. So the story that we're going to work on this week is the main characters are Aboriginal, and they are dealing with some of the things that we are going to talk about, just some of the injustices. But before we get to that, what we need to do is talk about these 10 words. And I will spoil this. I don't think they're that bad. They aren't that bad. So we're going to have 10 new words with our story about a rabbit-proof fence. So let's bring up some of those words right now. I don't know if that's the first word. Yeah, the first word right here, we've actually kind of talked about already. Can I make this even bigger? Get rid of the ads and all that stuff. Yeah. So I think this will help. I tried to find a picture that wasn't, geez, a couple of them I looked up because Quizlet only gives me so many, because I have the free version. They only give me so many choices for pictures. And the first couple were like, I don't like that depiction. It's a little bit racist, a little bit cartoonish. So I didn't have much to pick from, but I hope this would help you. I mean, if you want to stereotype a little bit, kind of maybe, well, that could be a Native American, I guess. But this supposedly, when I looked it up, it was somebody who was Aboriginal. And those are the people of Australia that were native to Australia. The next one kind of sounds like the word right here, granary. It's a place to store grain. So you might see these on farms in the United States, especially in the Midwest or so, where there's a lot of wheat. They might just like store the grain there for a while. So that's a granary. It's talked about in the story. All right, the next one, calico. We'll make that bigger. Calico. It's coarse cloth. Coarse is actually one of our words. It's like rough. Rough cloth with a bright print. And you can see there's a picture there. But I also want to talk about probably the most common way you'll hear calico. I'm warning, I'll pause here. Does anybody know calico? You will hear this with cats. So there is a type of cat called the calico cat, and it is like a brightly colored cat. Just like a lot of patterns. It's kind of a generic term, but a calico cat, you'll hear that. So bright cloth, rough, lots of bright colors. The next one, I'm going to talk about a different definition too that's not on the page. Galvanized. You will often hear this with metal. Okay, you don't have to know exactly like the definition here. Steel that has been coated with zinc for increased resistance to rust. But if you ever hear of like metal that's galvanized, just know it's been treated to prevent rust. But there's another definition that you'll probably hear more in the wider world, like the real world. If somebody or a group of people is galvanized, that means something has happened to make them want to take action. Man, 2020. Let's go back to that. Oh, what's the guy? George Floyd. Wasn't it George Floyd? Yeah, Minnesota. So if you think way back to 2020, you all were quite young, weren't you? There was a police video that came out just like this man being killed. Like somebody, the police officer was like on this guy's throat for a long time, a knee to the throat. And most people who watched that were like, how can this happen? So that video galvanized people to take action. So there were a lot of protests during the summer of 2020. It was not a good summer, I don't think. Oh, man. I don't want to even think about that. Just that whole year, 2020 was awful. But galvanized means something happens and it usually creates some kind of an emotion, fear, anger, whatever, and it causes people to act. Galvanized. Brings people together usually, okay? Galvanized. Hope that helps. The next one, probably have heard this, right? Foliage. Just want to make sure everybody knew this. Foliage. It's just like the leaves of a plant. Foliage. And here, where we live in the fall, foliage turns bright colors. So a lot of people will come from other parts of the country and leaf peep, right? So foliage, not exactly easy to say. Foliage. Say it enough and it's going to start sounding weird. Foliage. All right, what's the next one? Let's bring it up a little bit bigger here. Oh, this one hits a little close to home. Receded. That means to go or move back further away from a previous position. Does that make sense? So you have some position here and then it like kind of goes back, fades away. You will hear receding hairline quite a bit. That one hurts. You'll also hear like the tide is receding. meaning going back. Let's go back to those protests. So you have a lot of people in one area, and maybe the police are pushing them further away. You could say that the crowd is receding further away, something like that. Receding hairline, the ocean, the tide is receding, going back. It's a good word to know. Hopefully that's new for you. The next one, sloshed. It's a good verb to know. Sloshed. And you can see that picture right there. I think this is as big as I can make it. I don't want to make it too big. But that person is definitely walking through water. The definition, splashed through slush, mud, or water. Yeah, it's almost springtime here. Doesn't feel like it. I think we're getting a snowstorm tomorrow or whatever. But eventually everything will start melting. And we will probably have to slosh into school a couple times. That flooding in my house, if you remember that at the beginning of the school year, that was not fun for me either. And the basement down there still looks the same. It is nobody has done any work on it. Still trying to get my buddy. His name is Keith. I went to high school with him, but he's just so busy too. He's supposed to start work here in the next couple weeks, but he said that a couple weeks ago, finishing up another job. Anyways, when that flooding happened in my house, I had to put my boots on, and I was sloshing in ankle deep water, I guess, a little bit over my ankles sometimes, but slosh, wet, muddy. Think springtime in Maine. The next one, it's a great one to know, secluded. It's an adjective that describes something hidden from general view or use. You can see, it looks like there is a secluded cabin there. Sometimes prisoners, when they've gotten into trouble, they will be secluded from the rest of the prison population. Maybe there's like an artist or a writer or something, and they want to get some work done. They need to go into seclusion. That's the noun. And they may become secluded. So maybe they'll take a month. Oh, I heard about these guys. Can't remember. I was listening to an interview of some movie star. I can't remember who it was. It's not important. But what they did was they wrote a movie script, and they secluded themselves in a hotel room together, I think for 3 months or something like that. And they got that, or maybe it was a month. And they got the script done. So secluded. Hope that helps. The next one, this can be taken a number of different ways, but in our story, compound, many houses together owned by the same family. All right. And you might hear of like, man, when I hear it, I think of like the Kennedy compound. Kennedys, John F. Kennedy, rich family. And they, I think, still have a compound in Martha's Vineyard in Massachusetts. So it's a big family, and a lot of them will have like summer homes in the same area. So you might hear it called the Kennedy compound. I almost think the Bushes. Do you remember George Bush? They live in Maine some of the time. I think there's a Bush compound. So it's usually like rich families all buying houses together. But it's basically a bunch of houses, a bunch of buildings owned by the same person or family. Hopefully that helps. We've already kind of talked about this one, the last one here, course. Course. Notice the spelling. It's not like an academic course. This is spelled in a different way. Well, if I do that, you can't even see it. But that's the spelling when you're reading it. It's not like a math course or an English course or whatever. It means rough. And hopefully that picture right there will help you understand course as in rough. First thing I think of, actually two things. Top of a skateboard, it's coarse, and a cat's tongue. If a cat has ever licked you, it feels like sandpaper. Sandpaper could also be called coarse. Hope that helps. Maybe you've gotten some of these done while we've been going over this stuff. And then now we're going to get into an interview that I talked about at the beginning with a girl. You know, I guess she's an Aboriginal descendant, but her family, the family history is a pretty rough one. All right. I was almost going to say it's coarse, which I think you could almost use, but I would say rough instead. Rough, not easy. All right. Adios, amigos.